Hey everyone, John Michael Swift, and welcome back to my 1952 Vincent Black Lightning series. So today, part 3, we're going to start going over some of the accompanying variations that go on in the verses. We've already done a lesson on the simple part where I explained the chord progressions. It's really important that you know that before this lesson, otherwise it's not going to make a lot of sense. We already did a lesson on explaining the main theme. I explained all that. And actually, a kind of a primary accompanying pattern. I'll go over a lot of the basic accompanying patterns again, and I'll add a bunch more. But I want you to realize these are all patterns that kind of get thrown around fairly freely, so it's good to know the patterns, but I'll try to explain how he uses them improvisationally to make the song really flow. Try to use the lesson navigator below. It's going to have a link to the tab that I'm using for this. It's going to have a link to... Really, in the description, there's all the timestamps for the different parts of the video, so if you want to jump around or work on it a little bit at a time and just get back to the point where you left off, that should be really helpful. And yeah, I mean, I think if you're savvy with all that stuff, we're ready to get to it. Okay, so I'm going to start out with just the most basic pedaling he does over the kind of the main B flat chord in the song. You know, you're comping away, and he just kind of pinches with the second bass note. And again, you can do this over any chord in the song. This is the most basic pedaling pattern you're going to get. And you can really kind of also, another pattern you can do that's very common, you can just take any of the really common Travis patterns from other songs like Dust in the Wind, like da 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 da. So those patterns work very well. There's a very special pattern that he uses in this song quite a bit. I honestly call it the 1952 Vincent Black Lightning pattern because there's not a lot of other songs that use it, but he uses it a ton. So he's plucking away on the B flat chord. There's a pinch first on the second bass note, so it's like bass pinch, that's your start. And then there's kind of two little offbeat notes on the second group, so it's like... That's the pattern. Pinch, pluck, pluck. Pinch, pluck, pluck. A little faster, it sounds like this. So the way you get that is you count 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and E and a 1 and 2 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 E and a 1. So that's a really critical pattern. Whenever you want it to just kind of sound more like this song, but you're just comping along with a little more energy, that's really good. When he's coming up to a cadence, or he's really trying to drive the energy into a transition, he'll start doing a rapid series of syncopations. So he basically does like a kind of a climbing pattern where he does the bass note, the pointer finger, and then the other bass note and the middle finger on your 2 thin strings. So he basically goes... Except he does it quite fast. He'll be going... So that shows up quite a bit. So I'd say work that slowly with me a little bit. Start with the bass pattern. Then off, off. Key is make sure you start with your index finger because you want it to be like the 2 low notes and the 2 high notes rather than the outside inside. M, I, M, I, M, I, M, thumb, 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 I, M, I. Again. One more time. And again, with any of these patterns, you can slow them down using the little cog button to change the speed settings in YouTube. That's often really helpful. You can do the outside-inside pattern, which you start with the middle finger first. You can do that sometimes, but it doesn't tend to sound as good in this song, so just a thought. The last really common pattern that you do over the 1 chord that I'll mention is what I call the Vincent Black Lightning snap. And for me, a snap in Travis picking is when you have 2 finger strokes, basically one right after each other, like 16th notes apart. So I tend to think 1 and 2 and 1 and... At speed, it sounds... It's very similar to the Vincent Black Lightning pattern I taught you before. Except that second middle finger stroke is followed by a pointer finger stroke that ends up pinching with the thumb on the open fourth string. So it goes 1 and 2 E and 1 and 2 E and 1 and 2 E and 2 E and. Let's take a rest and try it again. Ready? Here we go. 1 and 2 E and 1 and 2 E and 1 and 2 E and 1 and 2 E and. There you go. So I'll talk a lot more about snaps in the more advanced comping lesson because there's a lot of cool things you can do with them, but those 5 patterns are the most common basic patterns you're going to get, and they get you quite a distance just having those 5 patterns to switch between. So the next thing I want to talk about is when you start to get to the 4 chord. I mean, any chord that and when you play the F chord later in the as you start to kind of get towards the hook, you can use all these patterns in this too, but the 4 chord in particular has a lot of cool things that happen with it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how he gets into it. If you talk about this basic, the kind of offbeat pedaling he has, the kind of most basic pattern, he'll start to follow a bass line. The most common one is he'll go, starting from the A string, he'll go 4, 0 on the D string, 4 on the 6th string, 2 on the 6th string. And so in context, it looks like this. And you'll notice I dropped those to open first and second string. Usually when he starts to do advanced bass lines or he starts to move around and get away from this position, he'll drop these 2 notes and just have open E and open B. I guess open first and open second because they're not E and B anymore. But so that pattern at speed looks like this. And again, over the 4 chord, he usually uses the Vincent Black Lightning pattern I taught you before, except that the bass changes, a 4-stroke bass now. So it's 6th string, 4th string, 5th string, 4th string. And that's a loop again. 6, 4, 5, 4, 6, 4, 5, 4. And then VBO. Do that again a little slowly. It's 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 E and a 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 1 and 2 E and a. So let's try to get that bass line. Remember, it's 4 on the 5th string, open 4th string, 4 on the 6th string, 2 on the 6th string, and again, it's in the same, cadence as this. And you just let these fingers drop when you go down to this note and you want to try to land. So the whole thing at speed looks like. Let's do that a little slowly a few times. I'll do it 3 times slowly. Here we go. 1. Here we go. All right, one more time. 1, 2. Here we go. And. Time. Ready? Here we go. So that's your most basic transition into the 4 chord. However, those bass lines can get a lot twistier, and I'm going to show you a bunch of the variations that he does, some of which I've changed a little bit, but for the 90% of these are going to be ones that he's done in performances of the song. In the next lesson, I'll show you some really twisty ones that I came up with, but that's kind of for kicks and giggles later. Okay, so we're kind of on this pedal again. When he kind of does this 4 open, a lot of times he'll mess with bass lines just here on the 5th string, so he'll go. It's a really common one. He'll go 4, open, 5, open, 4, open. And then transition. So he'll go. Do that again. Here we go. 4, open, 5, open, 4, open, transition. And one more time. Here we go. go. 4, open, 5, open, 4, and transition. And that transition at speed should be... So it sounds pretty zippy when you get to that point. He'll often lead with this 4 on the 5th string, open 4th string, and then some kind of bass line on the low E string. So one example, he'll go 4, open, 4, 2, but then he'll add these 2 extra bass notes here just for extra time. So he'll go 4, 2, 0, 2, then transition. So try that with me a few times. 1, 2, here we go. 4, 0, 4, 2, 0, 2. Try it again. 3, 4. Ma na ma na na. One more time. Here we go. Now he also extends those bass lines into some of the upper registers a bunch. You know, one of my favorite little goofy ones he does is he kind of just messes around with this finger on 4 on all these frets. So he'll go 4, open. Now 4 on the D string, back to open, back to 4 on the 5th string, open, and then 4 down here, and then walk it down. So basically it goes... That's the basic bass line. 4, 0, 4, 0, 4, 0, 4, 2, transition. And the same kind of rules with this. You're just kind of just offbeating this. Here, 2, 3, 4. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. And at speed it sounds like... So another goofy thing he likes to do, I think, when he's just messing around, is take this idea and just really start climbing up the 5th string. Here, one time I saw him go all the way up to 9, so he did it about like this. 4, open, 5, open, 7, open with the pinky, and then he kind of let go just to kind of hit the, 9 above the capo. It's actually 12 with the capo on. So let's try that a little slowly. Here we go. 1, 2, here we go. He's going 4, 5, 7 with the pinky, and jump for 9, and switch. And here we go again. I'm going to try it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, up to 5, 7, 9 jump. And you want to kind of look ahead to the 4 chord as you're going there, because getting 9 all the way down to the first position takes a second. So here we go, one more time. Here we go. 3, 4. 4th fret, 5th fret, 7th fret. All right, so we're getting into some of the last couple variations that you can do. I mean, really, you can make these bass lines sort of as long as you want. Personally, I have a thing I like to do with, rather than using the open E, I sometimes like to use the open 2nd and 3rd strings as I start to get to longer ones, but it's not really required. So a few more twistier variations. You go 4, 0, 4, 5, 7, 5, 4. So this is a more meandering bass line. He starts on 4 on the D, open, 4 on the 5th string, 5, 7, goes up and kind of walks his way back down and finally lands. So this makes it a kind of a 5-beat bass line. If we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're transitioning. 1, 2, 3. So the whole thing at speed sounds like... So here we go. Let's try it slowly twice, and let's see how we do. Here we go. 1, 2, here we go. 4, 0, and up we go. All right, one more time. Here we go. 1, 2, here we go. There's one more bass line I really particularly like that I think is worth looking at. And just knowing these phrases, I think, gives you an idea of how to make up your own eventually. But these should give you a pretty good start. So this next one starts 4, 0, 5. And he goes all the way up to this B flat here for a second. As he goes 4, open D, 4 on the D, 5, 4. He goes down to open and 2. And finally ends up on 2 and 0 on the 5th string again. At speed, it sounds like. So let's give it a try slowly a few times. 1, 2, here we go. Here we go again. 3, 4. One more time. So I hope from that you'll get a sense of how to improvise your own bass lines. Based on this idea, you'll start to hear he extends those under his vocals as he's leading up to a transition to the 4 chord in the verses. But there's no one set way or length that has to be done. He just tends to elaborate it more and more as he goes on, both through the song and through the years he plays it. All right, so next we're going to look at just when he plays the 4 chord and some of the different riffs that he does. I mean, the most basic way he does it is just to do the Vincent Black Lightning pattern with a 4-stroke bass. And a 1, 3, E and a 1, and 2 E and a 1, 2, 2 E and a. Nothing really fancy. But oftentimes he'll do it just with a 4-stroke bass. But he'll do it with that kind of offbeat pattern I showed you over the 1 chord. So it's a little different to do it with the 4 bass. So that's something that would be worth working on. So let's start with the 4 bass. And we're going to start with the pointer finger all off beats. Just switching the middle and the pointer finger. Start over again. 4-stroke bass. Get it established. Here we go. Pointer, middle, pointer, middle, pointer, middle, pointer, and pointer, middle. So getting used to doing that with a 4-stroke bass is a little different for a lot of folks. But now if you want to get really twisted, you can add the E string into that as well. I often do. The riff I particularly like to do is... right there. So I'll show that yet slowly a few times. It goes G, B, G, E, B, G, B, G, and then the bar's over. String numbers for the fingers, I mean, again, the thumb's still doing this 4-stroke bass, so try to get that established and take it for granted, but it's really like, you want to look for individual switches that might trip you up and try to isolate them. But I'll play the whole thing so you can get the idea. Then I'd play along with it slowly and see if you can figure out which exchanges get you and focus on those. Start over again. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pointer, middle, pointer, ring, middle, pointer, middle, pointer, over. One more time. Pointer, middle, pointer, ring, pointer, middle, pointer, and done. And at speed, it should sound like, which I think sounds really great as a flourish going in there. So that's something to consider. A very common thing he does when he's kind of going over the Vincent Black Lightning pattern, there's a really standard one. He'll slide. he's got two slides that he does. One of them is he takes the same shape, first fret of the second string and second fret of the fourth string, and he'll just slide those up. It's kind of like going a C to a D out of open position, so give that a try. Let's try that a few times. Here we go. Pattern, slide, back, and then back to the 1. Let's try it again. Ready? Here we go. 3, and slide, back, and back to the 1. And you're just keeping the same Vincent Black Lightning pattern the whole way through. Here we go. One more time. 2, 3, and pattern, slide, back, 1 chord. Now, a very similar thing, but gives it a little bit of a different flavor. He'll do this slide, but instead of just sliding the shape wholesale, he'll bring the middle finger up to the 3rd fret and use the ring finger also on the 3rd fret. So it's like a Mixolydian slide. You get a different chord, which is a little darker than the first one. So you do the same pattern. You slide up to 3 and 3 on the same strings. Let's try that a few times. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and. Very good. One more time. 1, 2, 3, go. Alright, so one other little variation he likes to throw in there, which I think is kind of neat, is he'll throw in a little bass line on the 5th string. So the 4th string bass basically becomes this. So for a little bit you cease hitting the 6th string. You go 6, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, as you go, essentially, you're using kind of the 2nd fret on the A string. So you essentially go over the regular. You can basically do it over the Vincent Black Lightning pattern, but it's easiest to do over just kind of the offbeat pattern. So if you go, and what I'll often do to get out of it is do a Vincent Black Lightning pattern kind of normally at the end. So you go, and then you go back to the 1 chord. I do believe that's what he does most of the time as well. So let's try that a few times. You go 1, 2, here we go. Offbeats. BBL pattern. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. Offbeats. Bass, 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 pattern. One last time, let's try it. Here we go. 2, 3, here. Bass, 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 pattern, switch. So those are the most common variations that you're going to get in the verses, and they go a long way. A lot of those patterns, you can use them over the different chords. In fact, if you really want to get a pattern down, try playing it just, once you've brushed through the whole set of changes, try doing any one of those patterns. You can try taking That's just the 1952 Vincent Black Lightning pattern I showed you at the very beginning through the whole verse. There's some tricks that you're going to run into, but trying to figure out, okay, how would I get around these is actually really good for you're starting to develop some more musicality and some more freedom in this song. So when you run into problems, don't get shy about them, but think to yourself, okay, what can I do to get around this? Really try to challenge yourself to figure solutions out. So the next video we're going to have on this is going to be how to play all the break solos, all the really crazy, all that kind of wacky chromatic stuff that he does in between the verses. And after that, we'll hopefully go into some more twisty variations that I've kind of made up, some ways of improvising on the song. Again, if you find this helpful, consider subscribing to my channel and donating to my Patreon campaign. That really kind of supports me making these things. Yeah, but I hope you actually get a lot out of this, and yeah, this is what you're looking for. So thanks for sticking with us, and hope to see you again soon. Catch you later.